Alright, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about spans and divs before we continue. These are important concepts to understand when writing XHTML and utilizing CSS, and we'll be using spans and divs quite a bit as we continue on with the course. So if you aren't familiar with them, hopefully this will clarify everything. Basically, spans and divs are like a neutral container. And they have no default attributes. So basically when you use a span or a div, it basically has no effect on your markup until you explicitly style it using CSS. And this is a very useful tool to be able to use because you can mark elements that have some meaning to you that aren't specifically defined by XHTML. If your document finds itself in an environment where it cannot use your style sheet, for some reason, like you're using an older browser or something like that, the spans and the divs have no effect on the presentation. So it's not like they're going to, screw up how the page actually looks if something is unable to, understand them. So let's talk a little bit about what they both are. I just have a basic page with just a paragraph, an H2 tag, a paragraph tag, and that's pretty much it. So if we look at this page in the browser, not much is going on. This is what the page looks like. So we're going to start off and we're going to go ahead and make some formatting by using styles, and we'll add some spans and divs in there so that we can see how they affect the page. So I'm going to jump back into Dreamweaver, which is the program that I'm going to use to be editing my XHTML. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to add a style. And remember, when I'm just going to use inline styles because they seem to be easier to use as we go about writing our code. So I'm just going to go ahead and put them in the head document, and I usually add them right into right above the closing head tag. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my style tag, and then what we'll do is we'll specify a type. So I'm going to go ahead and use a type, and I'm going to be creating a style that is text and CSS, and we'll close the tag, and I'll go ahead and add my opening comment tag like so, and I'm just going to throw a couple returns in there, close the comment, and then I'll go ahead and close the style tag. So now I'm all set up here to go ahead and start writing my code. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the font. If I make this page just a little bit more narrow so that we can see in the browser, you can see that right now this is just using the default font that is basically Times. So let's just move this page down a tad so that we can jump between these. So I'm just going to do that, and this is just so we can see the styles at work and practice using styles. So I'm going to go ahead and just style the body. By styling the body, it's going to affect the font in every place in my body. So no matter what I have, lists, paragraphs, breaks, headers, all of the text is going to be affected since I'm directly styling the body. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to specify a font family, and we'll just go ahead and we'll specify the font family be, let's just use Helvetica, and I'm going to close with a semicolon like we're used to doing right there. I'm just putting a space there, and that's just because it makes it easier for me to read it. That is not a necessary element by any means. So if I save my page right now and we go back into the browser and we reload the page, you can see how both my head tags and my paragraph tags have now changed to show the font that I specified. So it's kind of nice to have kind of a master tag that you can style like the body tag, and we'll be working more with that as we go on in the class as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my page, and I'm going to go ahead and add some span and div tags so we can see how they affect it. So I'm just going to go ahead and start by adding a span tag. So I'm going to do an opening span tag, and I'm just going to enclose the sentence. A span is an inline element and does not force a new line. And then I'll put a closing span tag here. I'm going to save my page, and if I preview it in the browser by reloading the page, you can see that absolutely nothing has happened. This has basically had no effect whatsoever on my page, and that's because when you use spans, they don't. A span has no inherent formatting at all. the only way that it is going to have some formatting is if you style it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to come back to our HTML document, and we'll go ahead and we'll write a little bit of code in here. We'll create a style for the span tag. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to specify that I want to style span, opening curly brace, and then we'll do our closing curly brace. And let's go ahead and on the span tag, let's make the font weight bold. So I'm going to go ahead and specify font weight, and then I'll just specify that I want that to be bold, semicolon. And let's also go ahead and add a background color. So I'm going to do a background color, and we will go ahead and use a background color of FFCC33. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in there, and it doesn't matter if this is capitalized or not. The interesting thing about hex values is they actually don't have to be lowercase, like all your XHTML tags do have to be lowercase. Hex values do not. So this is kind of a yellow color. So if I save and now I go back in here and we refresh the page, you're going to see that the text that was surrounded by my span tag now has a yellow background, and it also appears bold. So the span is basically an inline element in that you can see that it just shows up or appears in line to my text. Other inline elements are things like emphasize or something like that. So if I go ahead and I add an M tag here, which is the emphasize tag, this also is an inline element, as opposed to block level elements. Block level elements are things like H2, like paragraph, things like that. You can see that no effect now shows italicized because that, just like the span tag, is an inline element. So there's an example of our span. We're going to go ahead and add a div tag, and we can see how the div works. So right here I have something that says divs. A div, on the other hand, is a block level element. So let's go ahead and let's just surround that by a div tag. So I'm going to open a div tag, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to close my div tag, and I'll save, and we'll refresh our page in the browser to see what's happening. And you can see that this actually is appearing as if it is a new paragraph. Div tags basically are block level elements, and they basically are going to automatically start on a new line. So a div tag is similar to other block level elements like head tags, like paragraph tags. It automatically starts another line. You can see that the text that immediately precedes the div tag really doesn't have any sort of change to it. It just is almost like a break, but this follows its own, because it's block level. The easiest way to think about it is that it forces another line. So let's make a style for a div. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to type div, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my opening curly brace and my closing curly brace just like we've done before. And let's do the same sort of thing that we did for our span. Let's do a font weight of bold, and let's come down here and let's also add a background color. And the background color that I'll use for this is going to be CCCC00, so it's kind of like a lime green. And in addition, let's just add a border. Now I want a border to appear all the way around, so I'm just going to type border. I don't have to specify border bottom, border top, border left, border right. I can just type border, and then I'll put the amount, the width of the border, which in this case is 3 pixels. I'm going to have this border be dotted, so I'm just going to type dotted, and then I'm going to type the color that I want my border to be. Now, when you are adding multiple values, you don't have to separate them by commas or anything. You just write them together like this. So the border is going to be a 3 pixel dotted line, and it's kind of this light yellow color is the color that I've specified here. So if we save and we come back to our browser and we refresh the page, you're going to see that, and I must have written something wrong, so we'll go back there in a second. You're going to see that the div has this background color. My border isn't showing up, so I know that something is wrong there, so let's go check on that. Oh, I wrote border, which doesn't understand that I actually meant border, so let me add an R in there. That looks much better. I'll save and we'll refresh, and now we should see the little dotted line that appears around the edge. But this obviously illustrates that the div tag being block level is going to take up an entire line. So it basically spans the entire line of my web page, and then it forces a line break on the next line. Remember that this next line of text right here came immediately following the div tag. There was no, here's my closing div tag, a paragraph or anything that would force that to wrap down. The div tag itself actually forced that to wrap down. So the span and div are very, very powerful in that they, act like inline or block level elements, but they basically are completely neutral until you style them. So they'll have no default attributes. The advantage of this is that you can really do some sophisticated design work using CSS by separating content on your page using div and spans. So we're going to be using those a lot as we go on. Now in this example, I simply styled the span tag and the div tag, which means that if I have multiple span and div tags, they will all be styled the exact same way. So we're going to kind of talk about that in the upcoming movie, how we can actually distinguish between span and divs, because a lot of times you're going to want to create multiple div and span tags, and you're going to want to be able to address those individually. You basically can apply a class and ID attribute to span and div tags, and that is it's kind of like identifying those as a unique element, and then you can style them independently of each other. So keep that in mind, and in some upcoming movies we'll discuss that.